Okay, welcome everybody to this meeting of the Partnership Cabinet on Wednesday the 18th of December 2024. My name is Councillor Simon Werner and I'll be chairing the meeting. This meeting is being held in person at York House, Windsor and via Zoom, being streamed live to the public on YouTube. I remind all attendees in the meeting that participation indicates consent to the audio and video being streamed live and acknowledgement that after the meeting it will continue to be available in the public domain. I think firstly it will be useful if all the Cabinet members can introduce themselves. So as I said, I'm Simon Werner and I'm the leader of the Council.
Good evening, I'm Councillor Lynn Jones. I'm Deputy Leader and Lead Member for Finance.
Councillor Mark Wilson, Lead Member for Corporate Services.
Councillor Jeff Hill, Lead Member Highways and Transport Customer Services.
Councillor Richard Coe, Lead Member for Household and Regulatory Services.
Hi, good evening. It's Councillor Jack Douglas, Candidate Member for Communities, Leisure and Volunteer.
Good evening, Councillor Karen Davis, and I'm Lead Member for Climate, Biodiversity and Windsor Town Council.
I'm Catherine Del Campo and I'm the Lead Member for Adults, Health, Housing and Equalities.
And we have Adam online. Adam?
Good evening, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. Good evening, I'm Councillor Adam Burmange, Lead Member for Planning, Governance and Asset Management.
Okay, fantastic. For other councillors and officers who have not introduced yourselves, once I've invited you to speak, please, before you do so, state your name and capacity in which you're speaking, if appropriate. We have two public speakers tonight to register for this evening. We have Anna Linklater, who's going to speak on agenda item 6. And we have Andrew Hill, who I think is online, who wants to speak on 6, 9, 10, 11, 13 and 15. I'd just like to take this opportunity to remind all persons wishing to speak at tonight's meeting that all comments should please specifically be in relation to the agenda item and its published report. And we will now start on the agenda. Do we have any apologies for absence?
So as you've seen, Councillor Burmange is joining us virtually, so he can take part in the debate, but he can't vote on anything. And Councillor Teasley will be joining us soon.
Fantastic. Any declarations of interest? No. Okay. Minutes of the last meeting. Are we all happy with them? Excellent.
We have an amendment from Councillor Price in relation to, what item was it, Councillor Price?
Councillor Price, would you like to come up and...
In writing, I thought it would all be taken care of, so I haven't got the details, but it was what I've said that I did represent.
Owen, were you happy with her changes as an accurate record?
Yeah, so Councillor Price sent it to us in writing. The chair has reviewed it, and it's just a minor amendment to a couple of words just to clarify what specifically Councillor Price was saying. Having reviewed the YouTube video, it is more accurate. If Cabinet wishes to endorse it, then we can approve that.
Yeah, fantastic. Agreed.
Simon, sorry.
Councillor Burmange has his hand raised.
So it's been a long time since I've used Zoom, so I've forgotten where the hand up button is. So I'll have to figure that one out in a second. I also, in relation to the item from the last meeting on the affordable housing SPD, there were a couple of questions that Councillor Price asked at the meeting that I didn't immediately have the answer to. I've now had written responses from the officers, which I provided to you, Chair, and also to Oren. I'm hoping they can be added as a written response so that the answers are made public and transparent, if that would be agreeable to the meeting as well.
Yeah, I think that's really useful to, when questions are asked and they're not answered, to get the answers minuted, even if they come in.
For the contract remedial repairs item, we had that situation, and those responses offline have been included as well. So happy to do that with this item as well.
Fantastic. Anything else on the minutes? Mark?
Sorry, just to return to declarations of interest in relation to item 13, the demand for school places. I'm a co-chair of governors at the Windsor Boys School. I don't think that sort of directly affects the recommendation, but just to disclose that for completeness.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, then I'll declare an interest because I'm a governor at King's Court First School in Albany.
Okay, any other governors? I have a 14-year-old child, but I don't know whether that counts as an interest on school places. No. Okay, fantastic. Is that the end of the minutes? Can I sign them as a true and accurate record? Yeah, fantastic. We have no appointments. So now, Owen, over to you on the forward plan.
Thank you, Chair. So a number of changes since our last meeting on the 4th of December. So we've got 5 new items. So first is the Public Space Protection Order, scheduled date for the 29th of January meeting. 2 quarterly assurance reports. So one for the 29th of January and one for the 30th of April. Council tax rebate for AFC foster carers with a child in placement is a new item for the 29th of January. Review of property and future delivery model is a new item for the 26th of February meeting. And then one change to an item, the air quality monitoring strategy and revocation of air quality management areas item has been delayed from the 29th of January meeting to the 30th of April meeting to ensure that there is a full year's worth of monitoring data to analyse.
Thank you very much, Owen. Any other comments on the forward plan? No, good. Okay. So we'll now move on to the adoption of sport and leisure strategy. We do have a public speaker. Would you like to, yours is a statement, so if you'd like to come up and you have how long? 3 minutes?
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. My name is Anna Linklater and I am the founder and director of Links Gymnastics. As detailed within the new leisure strategy for the Royal Borough, Links Gymnastics is looking for assurance that the Royal Borough will continue to work with Links Gymnastics to deliver a dedicated gymnastic facility at the Windsor Leisure Centre. Links Gymnastics has been established in Windsor and Ascot for over 10 years, providing gymnastics lessons for recreational to competitive gymnastics. At Links Gymnastics alone, there are around 920 gymnasts attending classes every single week, with expected growth to 1,200 by the end of Q1 2025. We currently operate after 2 venues in Windsor, the Windsor Leisure Centre, and since November 2023, an additional facility in Dedworth. The health benefits from the sport, the popularity and the demand for gymnastics and a dedicated facility in the borough is unquestionable, and in particular, a key project for the community following the well-publicised closures of several prominent and dedicated gymnastics facilities in the local area. This has meant there is no longer a dedicated facility in the borough for recreational gymnasts or for top elite gymnasts. In fact, gymnasts who perform at a high level frequently have to move or find clubs outside the borough in order to use state-of-the-art equipment, including pits and sprung floors. Furthermore, the majority of clubs within the borough have waiting lists. In June 2019, Slough Gymnastics Club closed. In June 2021, Phoenix Gymnastics Club closed. This displaced around 2,000 gymnasts and the community lost 2 dedicated facilities. Both closures were due to the inability to identify a new space, location, venue or building within the Royal Borough, despite efforts from both clubs and councils. In fact, despite searching for options for over 10 years, the delivery of a new facility has yet to come to fruition. However, we now have a clear pathway to remedy this oversight. Multiple factors have aligned to provide an optimal opportunity for the borough and Links to work together to deliver this project.
1 minute remaining.
These include planning permission, which we have now obtained at the Windsor Leisure Centre. A strong business plan. Links Gymnastics has a strong business plan to support the delivery of this facility, along with a good return on investment for the borough. Perfect timing to agree terms with the new leisure centre provider. The new leisure contract for the Windsor Leisure Centre is due to be awarded imminently, if not already, providing the opportunity to agree new terms. In conclusion, there is no doubt that this project would be an extremely positive addition for the local community, and no doubt that with multiple factors aligning that this is a prime juncture to progress this venture. Can the Cabinet therefore provide assurance that once the new Windsor Leisure Centre contract has been awarded, discussions and next steps will be agreed as a priority to progress the delivery of this much needed facility? Thank you for your time. We look forward to working with you and creating an amazing legacy together, perhaps even Olympians in the sport that will inspire children for future generations to come.
Thank you very much. Jack, would you like to cover the report now?
Yeah, thanks very much. Shall I just
Yes, please do.
reply to Anna first of all? So thanks for coming, Anna. It's great to see you here. The leisure contract you mentioned, it's not been awarded quite yet. So it is too early to get into any specifics, but I'm delighted to say that we are looking forward to working with Links to deliver this very exciting facility. We know there's a lot of demand, especially as you say, with the closures of dedicated facilities in and around the area. And a dedicated facility will be very popular for this gymnastics in Windsor. We need to get things moving as soon as the leisure contract is announced. Just a few weeks, I think, to go. So thanks again.
Thank you, and I'd like to support that as well. I was obviously very upset with what happened with Phoenix Gym in Maidenhead. I thought it was a real tragedy, and you know, we obviously can't guarantee anything, but we'll certainly work really hard to try and make it happen. So thank you for coming.
So on to the paper.
Yes, please.
And can I start off by thanking officers who've been involved with putting these strategies together. Michael, I think you're online in particular, has had his hands incredibly full with the leisure contract. I'll just make a few sort of general comments on the strategies up front. These strategies, sport and leisure strategies, they come out of a lot of research that's been conducted over the last few years. They identify where we are now from a physical activity perspective, including assessing the quality of and access to sports facilities within the borough. And the research also identifies barriers to the physical activity participation of residents. Now, and this is quite important, I think, due to the complexity and the timescales, the strategies are an ongoing process and they need to be reviewed and updated where appropriate. And that will include being reviewed and updated over the next 12 months after adoption as part of the agreed Sport England review process. And this itself will include consulting with sports clubs as per usual. The process ensures the changing needs of the council and residents and clubs and facilities are reflected on a continuous basis moving forward. And going forwards, the result of the leisure procurement process, the implications of the updated National Planning Policy Framework, the NPPF, and also the forthcoming National 10-Year Health Plan, they will all need to be considered as part of the review process. So basically, in a nutshell, we're getting these in place. They're a snapshot in time. Lots of changes coming up, which are going to mean we have to update them, and that's just normal. Now, it's great to be able to consider adoption of these strategies before the new leisure contract, because the strategies will help shape and guide us going into a period where there should be higher investment from the operator, as it's normal to front load that investment during a long contract. I have been asked one question about why non-physical activities like chess aren't included. So I just want to point out that these strategies they're not intended to cover non-physical activities. That doesn't take anything away from chess or the benefits of keeping your brain active, or non-physical kinds of enjoying leisure. One more thing, very important too, we need to be clear that the strategies we're adopting today, they don't represent a commitment for RBWM to spend money we don't have, but they do bring benefit to residents, not least because they open the door to greater or more effectively targeted investment by other bodies. And just to give one concrete example of that, the new PPS increases the chances of the Football Foundation part funding 2 3G pitches in the Windsor area rather than 1, just because it's an up-to-date statement of the local need, which is one of their requirements. Now, to wrap up, I mean, as an administration, we obviously support any opportunity to promote physical activity and sport for local communities. There are many health benefits from having a comprehensive and up-to-date strategies, but I do want to say sport and leisure are not just about health. Health is incredibly important, those outcomes at the top of our list, but sport and leisure are also about fun. It's worth repeating, this administration is in favour of fun. And for that reason too, I'm delighted to support the recommendation to adopt the leisure strategy, the playing pitch and the outdoor sports strategies and the indoor sports strategy tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, indeed, we are an administration in favour of fun. So any other comments from Cabinet members? No, excellent. Alison, I think Alison had a question she wanted to ask. Are you online?
Hello, yes, I'm here.
Hi, Alison.
Hello, thank you for letting me out. I've got actually 3 questions, but so
That's fine.
about the sports and leisure strategy. So my first question is at 476 pages, the strategy is extensive and has significant financial and community implications. Will the council consider referring this document to a scrutiny panel to allow thorough review and structured input from sports clubs, residents and other stakeholders? My second question is, how has the council engaged local sports clubs in the development of the strategy, especially in addressing their financial and infrastructure challenges? I've spoken to Windsor and Eton FC and Windsor Rugby Club, and they hadn't seen it. I have sent them a copy, and I know that there's a meeting taking place about the 3G pitches tomorrow with Windsor and Eton Football Club. But, you know, it'd be good to obviously get as much input from all the local clubs as possible, which is why I thought it might be handy to go to scrutiny. And my last question is, what measures are being taken to ensure that any fee increases don't disproportionately burden clubs? Because we're having a sports and leisure strategy. I'll come to it in the budget about the sports pitch fees increasing. But, you know, I ask this coming from a deprived ward of Clewer and Dedworth East, where it's even more important to get, you know, kids involved with sport at an early age. So it's great that we've got a strategy, but I am concerned that, you know, they might be priced out of being able to do sport. Thank you. They're my questions.
Thank you, Alison. Really good questions. Jack.
Thank you, Alison. Thank you, Chair. Alison, yeah, thanks for coming. Thanks for asking these questions and supporting the clubs in your ward and around the borough. The first question was about scrutiny. The scrutiny panels, they can call in any decision from cabinet, so they can call in these strategies. I think there's a 5 working day limit. So Oren is nodding, so yes, I think that's right. So if the scrutiny want to call in, they've got 5 working days from the publication of the decision. Okay, which will be pretty soon, I think, after the meeting tonight. Under engagement, has the council engaged? So the consultation for these papers we're looking at tonight actually began quite a few years ago. I think 2022, maybe even 2021. When it started, Windsor and Eton Football Club didn't exist, which is why probably they haven't seen the consultation. So the previous sort of the football club at Stag Meadow, Windsor FC, they would have been consulted, and I believe Windsor Rugby Club were consulted as well. But if you're saying they haven't, that's something I'll check with officers to make sure it did occur. But yeah, 2021 or 2022 it might have been. So it might just be not top of their mind anymore. So your last question, what measures? Yeah, the burden on the clubs. So, I mean, it is a burden when we increase fees. It's not something we do lightly. You know the financial backdrop to these painful decisions. You're absolutely right that getting kids involved in sport early, particularly in deprived areas like Dedworth, is incredibly important. And I just want to thank you for drawing attention to that. As you know, we're in discussions with the most affected clubs, basically the clubs that use mini pitches and the non-full size pitches, about transitional arrangements that it will ease some of that pain. We can't take it away altogether, I'm afraid. Thank you, Alison.
Thank you very much, Jack and Alison. I think this is one of those that Andrew Hill wanted to talk on. So, Andrew Hill, do you want to come in, and then I'll go back to Helen?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Thank you. Councillor Douglas, I welcome your report and a commitment to enhancing sport in the borough. I know from first-hand experience how much you care about residents. But there is, in my view, a major discrepancy in the Cabinet's overall collective approach to sport. This document is derived from Sport England guidance, and they make it clear that there should be a modal shift towards accessible sport on your doorstep. Your officers identify unambiguously that the correct catchment area and distance for sporting assessments under Sport England guidance is a 20-mile driving range. And you see that in map 6, 7 and throughout the document. By contrast, however, Councillor Bermange has regular meetings with Carla Holmes, and together they've submitted a golf needs assessment that uses a 30-mile driving catchment, which has the effect of artificially making it look like residents have sufficient access to that sport by inflating supply. So my first question to you, Councillor Douglas, and perhaps Councillor Bermange, is why RBWM's approach to sporting assessments is to follow the Sport England guidance of 20-mile catchment areas for every sport except one, golf, Why is golf treated differently by RBWM and not in this sport policy? On December the 10th, Sport England wrote to you to say they were, quote, disappointed that you had failed to respond to their concerns from last February and update the golf needs assessment in line with their nationally accepted standards, following the same objections submitted in 2019. So secondly, Councillor Douglas and Bamanj, why is the RBWM claiming in the document to respect Sport England, but during the borough's largest planning application has refused to engage with them at all? In this report, you identify at paragraph 2.11.3 that by a country mile, the most important health and leisure activity is walking. 87% of residents walk as their primary form of fitness and leisure, and the next one down is said to be fitness classes at 33%. You were elected, therefore, with a mandate, therefore, to provide new and utterly amazing places to walk, like the Maidenhead Great Park, so that it becomes 87% and rising of residents who have even less need to get in the car and drive to places like Windsor and Burnham. We'd have nature on our doorstep. You rightly say in this document that you want to improve residents' health, reduce mental health issues, promote healthy lifestyles. Perhaps the best way of doing that is to negotiate with the Maidenhead Great Park CIC to operate this as an asset of community value and public open space in the way Lord Desborough intended. And then people would not see so much the tax problem, but they see in real life something astonishing and new, like the Werner Great Park, which I think has a rather nice ring to it. Will you support environment, nature and leisure sports like walking in the borough in a new amazing park, Councillor Douglas? Thank you.
I think, thank you for your questions. I quite like the idea of a Werner Country Park, but I think probably not. I think your questions sort of go beyond the subject that we're talking about here. We're happy to have a discussion with you about the points you raise, perhaps after the meeting. Yeah, we'll be in touch after the meeting to talk through the details of what you're saying. Okay, Helen, we've got.
Councillor Helen Price. The EQIA here is, I believe, excellent. So many congratulations to the team. And it's so excellent. What I'd like to suggest, and this is my question, is that it be considered an exemplar for others to help produce a much improved EQIA across all council areas. And maybe this is a question for Councillor Del Campo rather than Councillor Douglas. Thank you.
Well, firstly, I'd like to congratulate Jack and I presume Michael for writing such a, to be praised by you is praise indeed. And Catherine, you have indicated you want to speak.
Thank you. And thank you, Helen, for your continued advocacy for the EQIA. It's really noted and appreciated, and we've made enormous strides since you were elected in 2019 as a result of your advocacy. I agree it is an excellent EQIA. I have a meeting with the Equalities Officer in January and I'll bring it to that meeting. Thank you.
I would say on this paper, I know it's not this item, but the one under disabilities, that is also excellent. It shines out as well. So thank you.
Great, thank you.
And can we suggest to Owen that he circulates it amongst the directors and assistant directors with that commendation on it? Thank you very much, Helen. Are we all agreed with this paper?
Agreed.
Yeah, fantastic. And I look forward to seeing the links Jim built. Thank you for coming. Right, now the next two items, the report from the Domestic Abuse Task Force, Task and Finish Group and Domestic Abuse Strategy. I think we'll probably take those together, Catherine. Are you ready to go with them?
Pretty much. Find the right window. Thank you. Okay, so there's a good reason for taking these two together, and it is because the two subjects are just the two topics are so interwoven, and the work done by the Task and Finish Group has been used to inform the strategy. So the People Overview and Scrutiny Domestic Abuse Task and Finish Group was initiated by Councillor Amy Teasey and myself back in I think it was 2021 when we were opposition councillors. Because there was a new domestic abuse strategy presented to Cabinet then, and we liked it and we thought it was good, but we wanted to make sure that the lived experiences of survivors of domestic abuse matched the aims of the strategy. Obviously, when we joined the cabinet, we had to leave the task and finish group, and that work was continued by other councillors. One challenge that they encountered was that they weren't able to interview victims of abuse directly. That's in part because of the complexity of their cases, and you know, actually it has to be handled really sensitively. However, I can report that the RBWM Domestic Abuse Forum is just setting up its own task and finish to do exactly that, and those interviews will be carried out by trained officers. That task and finish will provide various safe routes for people to provide information, and the guidelines are that it must be helpful, not harmful to the victims. It must be helpful to the recipient of the information, and it must lead to meaningful change. So we're not talking about a simple data mining operation here, though it really is quite complex and needs to be handled sensitively, and I'm really happy that it's happening. So the new strategy was developed in parallel with that work of the task and finish group, and they were able to feed into the process and help shape the new strategy. And they made 5 important recommendations. Mandatory domestic abuse awareness training for councillors, to ensure that all agencies and organisations work in a collaborative way to provide safe accommodation whilst maintaining support networks wherever possible. Explore ways to improve signposting on the domestic abuse web pages on our website to make it as simple as possible to access information and support while maintaining a balance with the safety of victims. Ensure that the domestic abuse and safe accommodation strategy is delivered and appropriately aligned with the new refresh of the strategy. And finally, you know, recognising that all residents are important and should be provided support, but the victims with protected characteristics should be given special consideration in this strategy. For example, those from ethnic minority groups, military and travelling communities, as well as those from the I've mangled that again, the LGBTQ plus community, who can often find it more difficult to access services. And these recommendations have been incorporated in the strategy and the associated action plan. I've written to the People Scrutiny, Overview Scrutiny, to thank them for their work and for their suggestions. The updated strategy is also informed by a needs assessment, which was carried out late last year. Stakeholder input via one-to-one discussions with senior managers and practitioner focus groups. It's been developed to support our council plan aims, particularly supporting children and young people to live safe, happy and healthy lives, and developing resilience for families, people living healthy and independent lives in supportive communities. Highlights include, not surprisingly, a strong focus on housing. 20% of women who have experienced domestic abuse become homeless, compared with 1% who have not. The 2021 Domestic Abuse Act requires us to prioritise those facing homelessness as a result of domestic abuse. And we'll be working with neighbouring boroughs as well to see what reciprocal arrangements we can put in place for providing safe accommodation. I'm also pleased to see the use of independent domestic violence advocates, IDVAs for short, with our partner DASH for people who are at higher risk. And this includes a specialist housing and older persons role. I'm also really pleased, as I've mentioned before, to see a high emphasis placed on hearing survivors' stories in their own words, as well as recognition of the specific needs of marginalised groups and the need to address the link between domestic abuse and suicide. I'm pleased to see an incredibly detailed strategy with comprehensive equalities data and a robust 16-page action plan with clear goals, deliverables and target dates. Delivery of the strategy will be overseen by the RBWM Domestic Abuse Executive Group and report regularly to the RBWM Community Safety Partnership, Health and Wellbeing Board and Safeguarding Partnership. I also want to share some words with you from Councillor Amy Teasey, who's been delayed. She's asked me to emphasise that children and young people are now recognised as victims of domestic abuse if they're exposed to it, and are considered victims in their own right, not just witnesses. It's really important to understand the immediate and long-lasting effects of domestic abuse on young people, and that's why we're delivering healthy relationships workshops in schools to start early intervention and teach young people what a healthy relationship looks like. Also asked me to mention the Breathe programme for young people affected by domestic abuse and parent and carer relationships. This helps to increase confidence and esteem, acknowledge and work through past experiences, understand healthy relationships, and learn strategies to support well-being and stay safe. With that, I would like to thank the domestic abuse team and Dash for the valuable work they do, and I'm looking forward to working with you all to do even more for families impacted by domestic abuse. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Read through it, really impressed by the action plan, because so often we have policies and without a really substantial action plan, they're just paper, whereas this really gets to the heart of the matter of correcting things. So any comments from any of the members? No? Helen? No. Okay. Thank you very much. Can we agree that paper?
Sorry,
Jack?
I don't know whether I need to do this or not, but I did used to work with the Dash charity a lot, but just to be safe, declare an interest. But okay.
If you used to work with them, I don't think that's a problem. Yeah. Thank you very much. Is that paper agreed?
Agreed.
Fantastic work.
We're agreeing both.
Both papers.
Agreeing both papers. And task and finish group, that's a scrutiny panel, so it's great to see the scrutiny panel doing that kind of work. Fantastic.
Really good work, yeah.
Okay, moving on to Biodiversity Net Gain Habitat Bank. Karen.
Thank you, Chair. So this paper seeks delegated authority from Cabinet to the Executive Director of Place Services in consultation with Councillor Jones, Councillor Bermange and myself, to purchase a site in the borough for the purpose of creating a habitat bank for biodiversity net gain, as well as improving in principle the allocation of land we already own at Battlemead for the same purpose, and taking the implementation of Battlemead forward, subject importantly to the principle of not reducing existing public access at Battlemead. The paper is aligned with the strategic aim of the council plan for a cleaner, greener, safer and more prosperous borough, and links to the borough local plan, the environment and climate strategy, and the borough's existing natural environment work that's based out of the Braywick Nature Centre. It unlocks significant environmental benefits for the borough, offsetting the loss of biodiversity at both Maidenhead Golf Course and other development sites in the borough, with a measurable increase of 10% biodiversity net gain, and bringing forward a site managed for nature with responsible public access, which is safeguarded for 30 years. And on the Battlemead element, plans are at a very early stage, but agreement in principle is being sought to take this forward.
Thank you very much, Karen. Any comments from Cabinet members? Go ahead.
I just think it's really great, and the fact that this is, going to pay for itself is really.
Yeah, fantastic. And our finance lead is also very happy about that. Fantastic. I think we've got Andrew Hill. This is one he wants to speak to. So, Andrew.
Thank you, Councillor Werner. Last week, the council obviously wrote to residents asking for this largest council tax increase in modern times, 25%. But today, before you even know whether the government will help you, you say that you have enough money to buy or develop more land. You have refused my request to publish the sums of money involved this evening. If you're broke, shouldn't you stop spending? And especially stop spending our money just to help Carla Homes profit margin. The only downside to rejecting this report is you say in table 1 that, quote, this could delay delivery of the Maidenhead Golf Course development. I don't see how that's a downside when you stood for election saying you wanted to stop the delivery of Maidenhead Golf Course. This is your chance to stop it. This report is surely premature. At least delay the decision until you know where you stand financially and in planning terms next year. This cabinet did protect open space and the environment so magnificently on Braywick Park. You know what is right and wrong. You know that it's wrong to approve plans to chop down somewhere between 3,000 and 10,000 trees on the Great Park site. You know there is a climate emergency. Already we see storm drains overflowing, sewage in the streets and rivers from deliberately crippled infrastructure. In Table 1, you say the development of plans for Battlemead to act as a habitat bank would allow for significant measurable biodiversity improvements. I personally don't really understand how environmental destruction on this scale could be offset in our lifetimes. The negative column starts with -3,000 to -10,000 trees. So could you please explain how that colossal loss will be meaningfully offset with saplings and hedges at Battlemead that will take decades to grow to full size? Surely it takes decades just to get back to where you started before you even think about enhancing the environment. The Great Park Group, with resident support, have supplied RBWM with professionally commissioned ecology reports which set out how the BNG calculations use incorrect assumptions about the Great Park site and is thus currently flawed. This professional report was not provided to Cabinet tonight by officers as a background paper, nor were the points in it responded to. There were also detailed objections from the Woodland Trust, Wildlife Trust and other environmental groups. Why are these detailed BNG reports and objections not provided as appendices to your report and responded to, so that you and the Cabinet can get a fuller picture of the facts before you make irreversible decisions? I would recommend, for financial and environmental reasons, that you simply defer this decision until next year. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Andrew. I think you may have misunderstood what we're trying to do here and confused several issues. I don't think we're going to be chopping down any of the trees on site. I think we're going to be planting them, and we're going to be planting hedgerows and all kinds of things. I think this is really, it's about forward planning and investing, something that we're really keen on and something that hasn't tended to happen in the past. This is going to actually benefit the finances of the council and also increase biodiversity. So for me, it's certainly a win-win situation. And at the end of the day, we want to make sure that all the biodiversity net gain money is spent inside the borough and not in the north. And so I hope everybody can support this. Adam, I think you want to come in.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I've seemed to have turned into a mysterious blob. That's good. I just want to, I think you probably clarified the point, Simon, but and especially within the context of the meeting this evening, it's very important to note that this isn't about, us making a decision to spend, the council's money now. This is about a decision to ensure that developer contributions that will be needed to be made, regardless of what developer that is, and regardless of when those are directed, when they were made for off-site contributions to biodiversity net gain within the borough, and as you say, not remotely. I think it's really important to point this out. Biodiversity net gain is now law, this minimum 10%, and we can, of course, argue against the matrices, but ultimately a number will be calculated in any development, and if off-site contributions are needed to be made, I think it's great that there'll be an opportunity for those off-site contributions to potentially be made here in the borough. And hopefully for the not just for the benefit of biodiversity, but for the benefit of residents as well. So I think it is an important decision. I think it's good that Cabinet are making a decision tonight, although of course again the ultimate kind of operational side of things will be delegated. So it's if conditions change, of course that delegation will have to be reconsidered. But we've got a good opportunity here that's been identified. I think we need to allow that to move forward by agreeing to this paper this evening. So I fully endorse it.
Fantastic. I've got Helen indicating.
I'll declare an interest in that I'm a member of Maidenhead Golf Club. I've now got a question as a result of what's just been said. I thought you said we're not going to buy it yet, we're going to wait, but the actual recommendation is to delegate it for purchase. So I'd just like some clarification on that. My question before that discussion was if I could just have a brief explanation as to why this can't be achieved on site. I think I understand, but I'd really like to understand why. And then the other is, in that area, the development isn't just the Maidenhead Golf Club, but it's called, I think it's called the Elizabethan, or no, the Elizabeth Quarter, which is far greater. And so we have a loss of biodiversity in all these fields being covered with houses. And will the purchase of whatever it is you're looking to purchase compensate for that loss of biodiversity? I know this paper just says it's going to be for Maidenhead Golf Club, of course, but will that have enough room in it to compensate for the loss of biodiversity across the whole of the Elizabethan Quarter? Thank you. Elizabeth.
Chair, I think I can answer a couple of the points and start us off with a couple of the points, and then others might want to pick up on others. So on why can't the 10% uplift in biodiversity be achieved on site? That's very common in any sort of development, although golf courses are not naturally are not the most biodiverse of environments, because they're fairly well sort of manicured and with the greens and everything. If you're going to build houses and infrastructure on those green spaces, then it would be too difficult to restore what you're losing and add 10% on top on the remaining space. So it's there's this developing market in biodiversity net gain units that developers will buy when they can't for this purpose, when they can't increase enough biodiversity on site. So that's why it's sort of fairly normal for it not to be able to be achieved on site. Although it is important to note in the case of the golf course that obviously the key ancient woodlands and the sort of green spine are being preserved. So I think that was the first question that I thought I could answer. And then you were talking about some other related developments in Southwest Maidenhead. So I'm not familiar with those developments in terms of how they're achieving that or going to achieve their biodiversity net gain. Prior to this, any applications that came in prior to this January are sort of non-mandatory biodiversity net gain. It's before before the sort of provision came in. Although our policy is to maximise as much biodiversity on the site as possible, we want the principle of things being the sort of green spaces being enhanced for the benefit of the residents that are most affected by the loss of nature on the site. So we would always seek to have it achieved on site as much as possible. The next best thing is to have it achieved nearby. So I'm not familiar with it. Perhaps that might be something to pick up sort of outside the meeting, but it's possible that if those other developments can't achieve the requisite net gain on their site, perhaps they are able to, I don't know, but if not, then there would be the possibility of using the land at Battlemead and elsewhere to achieve that. And we're really, really keen to achieve that as near as possible to the sites that are being built on, so that credits are not being bought nationally and the money being spent on improvements elsewhere in the country.
Okay, thank you very much, Karen. I'm sure this conversation will run and run. Julian.
Other question I had that hasn't been answered was, I thought I heard you say that we are not going to buy it yet, but the paper says we are going to buy it.
Well, I think it's delegating, isn't it? If it's necessary to buy it, it's delegated so that we can get on and buy it. We don't need to buy it. We don't need to bring it back to cabinet to make a final decision, but we can talk more off-site. Julian.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you everyone for letting me speak here. I welcome biodiversity, and an increase in biodiversity is always a good thing. But what I question here is the location. You're talking about using Battlemead as a site, which is in Maidenhead, and
can I interrupt you there, Julian? I don't think we want to get into a discussion on the site in part one. We can take the meeting into part two and ask the public to leave. But we don't want to discuss, we can't discuss the location of the site in part one.
I will discuss it in general terms then.
Thank you.
And what I'm concerned about is that what we're talking about here is essentially something which is focused in the north of the borough, and I don't think there is any biodiversity net gain benefit for residents in the south of the borough. And we've always talked about being an inclusive borough for everyone, and I think it's really important to bear in mind that our residents are living in all parts of the borough. And I think if we're talking about something which is strategic, like a biodiversity net gain, we need to think about how we can deliver that to all residents in the borough. So rather than seeking a single site or sites for this, we should be thinking about where are the sites across the borough where we can deliver biodiversity net gain, so that all residents in the borough actually start to see benefit. If you select one site, and a site which may not be visible to many residents in other areas, I'm sure I could pick sites in my area where residents in the north of the borough don't have any interest, and it's the same the other way round. So I think if we're looking at doing something like a strategic biodiversity net gain policy, we shouldn't actually be picking a site. What we should be doing is looking at how we can put in the infrastructure to be able to deliver that right across the borough, rather than selecting a single site. So whilst I welcome biodiversity net gain in itself, I think we need to be far more strategic in what we're doing. It feels like we're talking about tactical solutions here, rather than something which is strategic for the benefit of all residents in the borough. And I think we need to be very careful about that, because we don't want to be getting into a situation where this administration is viewed as Maidenhead centric, which I think if I talk to residents in my neck of the woods, they certainly would say that. Thank you.
Completely agree with you. Absolutely, Julian. And what's really exciting about this is it's not only tactical, it's also strategic, because the model we've developed to use biodiversity net gains to the benefit of the borough can now be used as a model to use in other sites across the borough in Ascot. So if you've got some ideas of locations in Ascot where we could possibly test this model as well, please do bring them forward, Julian. You know, we're all ears. That's what's so exciting about this. We're ahead of the game in the country on making sure the Coal Council benefits from biodiversity net gain credits. So you bring those ideas forward, Julian. Can't wait to hear them. We have, who do we have? Adam again.
Very quickly, yeah, I just want, Councillor Sharp did speak about, acting more strategically. I would point out that the spatial strategy, which was adopted by the previous administration and the BLP, did indeed direct the vast majority of new development, not all development, but the vast majority to the north of the borough. So when we're looking strategically, I think it's important to bear in mind that spatial strategy that was adopted in terms of where development is likely to emerge in the coming years as well.
Thank you, Adam. That's also a really, really good point. Okay, so with this exciting proposal on the table, is everyone happy to approve it?
Very.
Agreed.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your support, Julian. We're now going to move on to the draft budget. Len, do you want to kick off?
Thank you, Chair. This agenda item is regarding the draft budget proposals for the year 2025 to 26. It's subject to change between now and February to ensure information received from central government around funding, including the settlement details received today, are incorporated. There will also be a review of assumptions used. It has been prepared in the context of an increasing number of councils stating they're at risk as a Section 114 in the near to medium term, and in conversation with MHCLG regarding financial support. Demand costs are increasing, particularly in children's services, adult social care, as well as housing and homelessness services, and high unpredictable rates of inflation, coupled with sharp increases in interest rates. Some councils have reserves that they can tap into to cover this demand. However, we now know that our reserves were most likely to have been in a negative situation in May 2023, not the 10 million stated by the last administration. The proposal aims to rectify historic budget issues, rebuild capacity in essential frontline services, and respond to increases in demand-led pressures, and will enable the council to set a balanced budget and deliver the services residents need. It details a spend of 127.4 million to deliver essential local services in the new financial year. This is an increase of 36 million on the current year's budget. It also includes efficiency savings of 5.6 million from the services we are actually transforming, and an additional 1.1 million from increased income. The budget does include our exceptional financial support request to government of 60.3 million loan, alongside being able to raise council tax by an additional 20% above the current limit of 4.99%, reflecting the level of support needed to rectify 30 million of historical accountancy errors and balance the budget. We need this support. The borough's unsustainable low level of council tax income compared to most other authorities, due to the Conservative decisions to cut it year after year, may have meant lower bills for residents, but the impact it's had on the council finances is dire. Put it this way, our net budget gap for next year is £32 million. If council tax hadn't been cut in previous years, our budget would be 30 million higher today. This would leave a budget gap of 2 million. If we didn't have to spend nearly 19 million next year to cover the cost of our debt, not only would we not have a budget gap, but we would have nearly 17 million surplus in our budget. The table at paragraph 5.64 demonstrates the disparity that has developed over time with neighbouring councils, and how, despite the proposed increase, the Band D tax will still be between £125, £457 cheaper than any of those councils. Another challenge the council faces is a high level of debt relative to the size of the overall budget. With a service budget for 25-26 at 127.4 million, council debt now stands at over 230 million, the cost of which is more than 18.6 million a year, the equivalent of almost 15% of council spend, and without any substantial assets to show for it. It was just borrowing to fund day-to-day costs. Just like you or me loading up our credit card and not being able to pay it back. But they were playing with residents' money, not theirs. We have also included up to 2 million in the budget to support the borough's most vulnerable residents, protecting them from the additional council tax increase, meaning they won't have to pay a penny above the usual annual increase of 4.99% on their council tax bill next year, and 500,000 of discretionary funds for residents who don't quite fall into the criteria for automatic payments. This builds on the support we already offer to residents to help them with their council tax bills, including council tax support, discretionary reduction, exemptions and other discounts, alongside the ability to spread the cost over 12 months by direct debit. And our budget means we can start putting back money into the services that matter to our residents, replacing what the Conservatives stripped out, like maintaining our streets, trees and play areas, and continue to be able to support the borough's most vulnerable residents by meeting the rising demand and costs of temporary accommodation and social care. At Appendix A, you can find the medium-term financial plan and the 2 scenarios regarding the capped increase and an increase of 20% above cap. It details the difference between effective bankruptcy and a financially viable council. Appendix B is the revenue budget for the 25-26, detailing the base budget and the forecast growth and savings for the year. The capital programme can be found at Appendix C, with new projects totalling 14.443 million, of which only 974,000 is from the council's general fund, and is mostly investment in IT-related schemes that have not seen investment in many years. Appendix D is the detail of the efficiencies, including in-year transformation. Appendix E is our service growth forecast. Appendix F is the detail of fees and charges, and Appendix G is the equality impact statement. If agreed by Cabinet, the draft budget will be shared for consultation for 6 weeks from tomorrow. It will be online, and paper copies will be made available in libraries for those without online access. And let me be clear, if the council is unable to secure the level of support required from government and raise council tax, then the issuing of a statutory Section 114 notice, which means the council is effectively bankrupt, is almost inevitable. And that would be an even worse outcome for our residents and not what they deserve. That's why our plan and these proposals are the only way. So we can build back into services and deliver what our residents deserve. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lynn. Can I call on Catherine now?
Thank you, Chair. I've said it before, I'll say it again and again, that we do, in adults health and housing, we do deliver good services at a low cost per head. But there is work to be done behind the scenes to make sure our services are properly resourced and to enable us to get and stay on top of the finances. So I just want to talk a little bit about what we're doing and what this budget will enable us to do across those 3 portfolios. So obviously we're doing ongoing cost reconciliations to ensure that our forecasts become more and more accurate as time goes on, and that combined with our new system, our new case management system, Mosaic, will allow us to actually know what is being provided and how much it costs. I've mentioned before that the existing system is incredibly outdated and it relies too much on spreadsheets and manual processes, and that's where those errors start to creep in. Mosaic is still scheduled to come online on the 13th of January and to be fully operational in good time for the new financial year. We've got an ongoing process to reduce age debt of £5 million and to make sure that it can't rise to those levels again. We've introduced a weekly care package panel to ensure care packages are as appropriate and as cost effective as they can be. We're bringing in specialists, Newton, to identify opportunities to deliver genuine transformation savings over a number of years. We currently have a modest savings figure for 25-26 of £500,000 in the draft budget at the moment, but it's important to note that this is subject to validation before the final draft goes to full council. As far as growth goes, we are aiming to right-size the budget to ensure there's money to pay for those already in the system receiving support, and to minimise the risk of overspend, and building in inflation above the CPI to recognise pressures on providers. Those measures will help us to maintain our position as a low spend council, whilst at the same time delivering the improvements that we've already identified and that have been highlighted by the CQC, to ensure that our services are good across the board. We're working to replace agency and interim staff with permanent employees. That's something we're making steady progress on, and we're looking to rack up savings as we go. But of course, this is good for residents, not just the finances, as residents receive that consistency of contact and care with social workers, occupational therapists, and so on. There's ongoing engagement with the NHS to help deliver on our shared goals of keeping people at home as long as it's safe to do so, and delivering the right care at the right place. And I'm hoping to build on that work with the co-production of a new joint health and wellbeing strategy in 2025. It's vital that we work together on these shared objectives and that each party contributes its share. In housing, like other boroughs, we are struggling with rising demand for temporary accommodation, and that's increased nationally by 25% in the last 3 years. We have a number of projects to address temporary accommodation costs, including 14 new temporary accommodation units at St Edmunds, and we're currently making offers to families to move in there. Also collaboration with housing providers via the Local Authority Housing Fund, and I'm also continuing to talk to the property team about other opportunities in the borough for temporary accommodation. Really importantly, in this budget, we have a growth bid in place to enable us to do preventative work with families at risk of homelessness, so that with the right support in place, they never need to go into temporary accommodation in the first place. At the moment, we're so tightly stretched and staff are completely overwhelmed with around 80 cases each, and we're not currently in a position to do that preventative piece at anywhere near the level we need to. And that is really heartbreaking for families actually who need certainty, and you know, it's really difficult to say to them, sorry, you know, you've got to wait until you're evicted before we can do anything for you. Our allocations policy, which is currently in consultation, will allow residents to remain in accommodation that they have sourced themselves while they're on the waiting list. So my hope is that this will help slash the number of friendly evictions that we're seeing at the moment. And I'm happy to note that today we've received a one-off settlement for the homelessness prevention grant and rough sleeper initiative funding that will enable us to continue the work we're doing for the year ahead. Obviously, we would love more certainty than that. We would love a 3-year settlement, but I'm very grateful for the 1-year settlement that we've just received. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Catherine. I would say, you know, I think it's been absolutely outstanding the work that you, Kevin, Andrew and the teams have done in adult services, and I think from day one you were really working to really transform the work that the council does in those areas. So you know, hat tip to you and the rest of the team. Thank you. Amy.
Chair. I'd just like to echo something that Catherine said about being a low spend but high outcomes authority. That is actually also true about children's services, and that's been evidenced by our recent success with Ofsted, who say that we're good overall but are outstanding in some areas. So that's fantastic. Saying that, we are making some considerable savings in children's services. But the budget challenges that we're facing in children's services for RBWM, they're not unique to us. They're all around the country. Councils are facing the increase in demand for support, and also it's the complexity of demand. Families are struggling more than they ever have been. We're having more children coming into residential care. That means they're not being cared for in an extended family member or foster carer setting. That has increased exponentially. We could not predict how many more children would need to go into residential homes, and it's well beyond any previous patterns or predictions. And it's partly because of that increased need, but also because of the challenges of sourcing foster carers. And that's our preferred model, is to keep children in the family setting. So we're also at the mercy of the markets with the children's residential care placements, and they can charge through the nose. Frankly, it's the Wild West out there, and to me it's sickening that they can profit from children's misfortune. So to be clear, when we're seeing increased spending in children's services, it's not because of an unwillingness or an inability to keep control of the spending. It's really because we have no choice but to act, because we have a legal and a moral responsibility to remove children from unsafe home environments and place them where they'll be looked after. We can't just ignore this, so we have to spend money. Of course, we don't just sit on our hands and let it happen. We've been working really hard to mitigate these costs. We've already taken decisive action. We've made some really good progress in the past year, and in this budget it talks about how we're going forward to make some progress to making those placement spends more sustainable. So, for example, we'll be opening our own children's home next year. We don't have one currently in the borough, and it means children who have a real need to be in a residential setting have to go far away. That's on its way, and it will support 3 children plus an emergency bed, which is going to be crucial. We're working really hard to recruit more foster carers and match children with appropriate families. Officers are working to step down children from residential placements where possible into foster care, which is better. We're going to be brokering our placements, really trying to negotiate those external placement prices, and I am heartened that the government also recognise that this is an issue, and in their recent policy paper that they're looking at capping those costs, which will help us. We want to increase the number of kinship carers. So that's where extended family might look after, or friends might look after children, and we need to support people who are interested in doing that so that they can help and keep children where they need to be. We're also working really hard to support our care leavers into independent accommodation, transition them from supported housing, and freeing that up for other young people, and we can support with private renting until council housing is available. So I mentioned that the challenges aren't unique to us, and I've said this many times before, it is true, but the difference is that we are not ready to cope with these pressures because of we can't weather the storm because of the self-harm that was inflicted on our budgets in previous years. And as Councillor Jones has said, our base budget is 30 million and lower than it should be. We know that over 70% of our budget is spent on adults and children. Catherine, imagine what money we would have if that hadn't happened. We'd have significantly more in the pot. But I'm really pleased that we've got really decisive action in place to get control of these spends where we can. But let's just not forget these are children that have to be kept safe, and so we must spend where we need to.
Thank you very much, Amy, and again, well done for all the work you and the team do to, right from the start, right from when we took over. It's been a roller coaster. I know it's been hard work, but we're really seeing those fruits come off, and really congratulations on the whole team on the Ofsted Good, and particularly the outstanding carers work. So really well done. Okay, who have I got now? Mark.
Thank you, Chair. So I'd like to highlight some of the other detailed proposals in the draft 25-26 budget. These are all needed to restore critical services to the level necessary for a functioning and sustainable council. Looking at the place team first, there is a significant programme of putting maintenance back in so that we can fix the mess on council property in our communities. The best example is with buildings. This is so clearly needed. There is basically no budget currently. And with the portfolio of buildings that we have, both old and new, this is totally unsustainable. And as residents point out regularly, there are many examples of urgent repairs needed just in my ward of Eton and Castle, never mind across the whole borough. Other areas where critical maintenance budgets previously removed are to be reinstated include for the repairs of lampposts, for tree inspection and maintenance, in parks, in playgrounds, with highways improvements, traffic lights and traffic signs. And these are all very visible and very familiar to residents, and we're putting them back into the budget with this proposal. On parking in particular, I've been pleased to work with Councillor Hill and with officers, and we've had a chance to basically look and completely review the parking pricing and to take a much more linear approach. We've looked at utilisation car park by car park, month by month, and the budget reflects this review. Busy prime location car parks that are operating close to capacity, such as River Street in Windsor and West Street in Maidenhead, do have increases on them. Car parks with surplus capacity or where volumes were impacted by last year's price increases, as well as those earmarked for resident shopping, are largely held flat. 3 car parks in Windsor and Eton in particular, Alexandra, King Edward VII and Meadow Lane, were identified for seasonal discounts in the 5 least busy months for times between 3 and 6 hours to support longer stays in the town centre with a particular focus on shoppers. Also, some on-street locations have had price increases, especially in more residential areas, to help retain those spaces for residents. Turning to corporate services now, I very much consider this to be the engine room of the council. We might not see it so often, but if it's not working, the council will grind to a halt. We're proposing staff increases in the revenues and benefits team. Partly this will avoid single points of failure in critical roles. We're also adding resource to collecting arrears and reducing the age debt. Also adding an Advantage card administrator, and in due course we hope to boost that programme. We're also looking for an extra financial inclusivity officer to support more residents, and this is particularly relevant obviously at this time. We added 2 of these financial inclusivity officers around a year ago to help residents claim benefits and other support that they are entitled to. This is free and confidential advice, and it also now extends to tackling fuel poverty with advice on managing fuel bills. More information on these officers and this support can be found on the Here to Help page on the RBWM Together community website. Just want to focus on the work of these, particularly over the last year. These 2 officers received over 600 referrals from residents and have so far secured the equivalent of £850,000 annualised of awards for borough residents in both one-off and weekly payments. This also can benefit the borough financially where those residents have council tax arrears, and this can help them catch up with payments back into the borough. The value of these officers to residents is very clear. They are, however, non-statutory positions. So if we were to enter a Section 114 situation, they would be at risk. This is a very good and very real example of why we are doing everything possible to avoid a Section 114, because we are genuinely acting in residents' best interests with the things that we can control. Some other highlights of what we're putting back into this budget. In information technology, we're adding an additional programme to improve the digital experience for residents on the website. And hopefully this will help reduce complaints from residents grappling with legacy systems for accessing council services online. In human resources, we're reinstating a training budget to cover the statutory training of officers with professional qualifications, which was previously removed. In legal, we're adding some legal team capacity with 2 trainee solicitors in a sort of a grow our own programme, and this will assist with the backlog and an increasing volume of legal casework across all service areas, notably planning. In procurement, we're adding 2 officers to better reflect the volume and the significance of contract renewals, which are now on a regular cycle. With outsourcing key services and functions, we need the ability to manage the retendering process strongly. In finance, we're also strengthening the team, bringing in a head of financial reporting and a head of financial operations. These key posts address many of the fundamental issues found by SIPFA, including the backlog of reconciliations, and they will also provide high quality financial reporting, obviously an essential as we watch every penny very carefully. We're also boosting our finance graduate scheme, again, training our own in a very cost-effective strategy. Finally, we're also extending our counter-fraud unit for a further year to identify those claiming benefits that they are not entitled to. And we're also boosting consistency in enforcement around the borough, in particular for parking. So to me, it is clear we need this budget to create a functioning and sustainable council, and we will still have the lowest council tax rates in Berkshire and among the lowest across the country outside London. Residents are most likely getting a better deal with this budget than they would with any other Berkshire authority, whether structured as we are today or any combination in the future. So the paper asks for approval to move to consultation. Consultation is residents' opportunity to provide feedback on the draft budget. Responses will help us to understand more about how our proposals will affect residents and the community. And please do comment anything else you think we should consider. We invite residents to comment. So basically, I support this budget and agree to proceeding to the next stage of public consultation.
Thank you very much, Mark. Okay, we've got a number of councillors who've got various questions for us. Obviously, with so many people, it's which I really welcome. It's really good to hear from all the councillors. So I'll probably take you in groups. So if I go with Helen and Neil first. So Helen, do you want to start?
I'll do all my questions in one. I recognise this is a draft and there will be changes up to the council meeting in Feb. Will you please produce a timeline from today to that February meeting, including the roles and input of the scrutiny panels, consultation, cabinet and government? This is so that both members and residents are crystal clear about what is happening and when they can provide input. And the question is, what happens if the cap, which is currently 4.99, this government decide to put it up to say 10%? Are we saying we're still asking for 20% plus the cap? Or are we saying in total it's 25% that we're asking for? Right, please explain, how does the budget process is more robust than last year? I'm asking because last year in Appendix O of the budget papers, we were told what a rigorous process it would be. But then we discovered that there was zero budget for trees and street furniture, and also the costs of moving to fortnightly bin collections, a decision made 3 or 4 years ago, were revealed at the last cabinet meeting. So how have things improved since then? Then the Home Care Association recently published a report explaining that the combination of the increased national insurance and raising minimum wages would hit care provision hard, resulting in some going out of business. The support for residents would have to be delivered, and it's pointed out that ultimately this would be the local authority that would have to do this, and this would make many councils bankrupt. Has this been factored into our care costs, and if not, will it be? And then I will repeat something I've raised before. Will the contracts that we have be checked to ensure there's no possibility that the increase in national insurance borne by our contractors can be passed on to us? And I'm asking because so many of our services have been contracted out, and I'm aware that some of our historical contracts have been so poorly drafted, I fear we might be at risk, and I don't want that to come back and bite us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Helen. If Neil wants to step up now.
Been over slightly so I can see. Thank you very much, Chair. And the questions around this are just a bit of clarification. I'm always interested and always have been in the medium-term financial plan and the management of debt and the way that goes forward. And I always have been. I've got sort of track record of always challenging and questioning. But I'm interested really with this, the debt burden, what we've got sat there. There's 230 million at the moment. Given that that kind of borrowing is normally used on assets or for gaining assets, which can add to the balance sheet of any business or council, I was wondering, because it's been mentioned a lot of times, that a lot of money has gone into this, but not many assets have come out, whether there was actually either a percentage or a total value of that £230 million that's been gained over the last 10 years or so, that's actually realised assets and the values of those assets. I'm wondering if we have an answer to that.
Fantastic, Neil. We'll get an answer for that. We've also got Alison and Suzanne online. So Alison, do you want to go first?
Thank you, Chair. So I've got a couple of questions about the consultation. I assume that the consultation will ask residents whether they agree to significant council tax increase. a proposal many are unlikely to support, I assume. So what weight will you give to their views, or is this, as many of my residents fear, simply a box-ticking exercise, given that Lynn said that the council faces no real choice and must raise council tax to avoid issuing a Section 114 notice? And I've just got one further question. Considering the delays in publishing the results of recent consultations, can you assure me and our residents that the full results of the upcoming budget consultation will be published and widely shared ahead of the final budget meeting at full council? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alison. Good questions all. And Suzanne, and then we'll go to the members.
I've still got another one. You cut me off before.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realise you had two. All right,
Anyway.
Suzanne, if you hold your horses, we'll go back to Neil. Oh, you're here.
Next, medium-term financial plan. There's two scenarios. It's I know this is a draft, but we have a binary choice, which is the 20% increase and keeping things stable. But it is actually quite usual in any business that's burdened with a high level of debt, which remains solvent. It's actually quite normal to look at rescheduling all or part of short or medium-term debt into longer-term debt to reduce the liabilities. And given that the requested short-term capitalisation is effectively a 20-year prepayment, which you could say mid to long-term of the capital borrowed for this, has the feasibility of renegotiating the current debt burden been looked at, costed, and compared against that option of the high council tax increase? It would be nice to see that as a third option on this, because I think it's a very viable option to look at. Even if it turns out that with current interest rates, it ends up more expensive, it would close the door on that argument. But usually, it's a standard business practice to look at how you reschedule debt into the future and into a longer term to reduce the liability. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Really good question. Very interesting. Suzanne, and then we'll go to the cabinet members.
Thank you, Chair. Suzanne Cross, representing Bray Ward. Thank you for letting me speak. I've been contacted by several residents in my ward who are deeply, deeply concerned about the proposed 25% council tax hike and the prospect of potentially facing this increase all at once, especially with the news today that the UK inflation is rising for the second consecutive month. Whilst I understand the residents currently receiving council tax support will be protected from this rise, many of those who have reached out to me do not qualify for benefits. They're struggling to see how they would make ends meet as the cost of living continues to rise. And this includes pensioners who have lost their winter fuel allowance due to having a modest personal pension alongside their state pension, leaving them excluded from additional support. So my question is, we've heard from Councillor Jones that there will be some provision for residents who may find themselves in sudden financial hardship due to this potential increase. But do we know if this provision is enough? And will the process be to apply be simple, fast and accessible for those in need once the council tax increase is approved?
Okay, thank you very much, Suzanne. I think most of those questions I've got time for. Lynn, sorry, what's happening?
Yeah, Councillor Walls, as we see your hat, we'll come back to you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so I'll tick off the questions as you answer them. How about that?
Okay, so Councillor Price, regarding a timeline, we're not expecting a final decision from central government on a request until the middle of February, and so have had to amend our processes to ensure we're able to react to any decision. So we have recently amended the budget council meeting to the, I believe it's the 5th of March, and have now rearranged scrutiny meetings. Now that that's been finalised, I will ask officers to forward the timeline to members. The budget process, obviously the process is only good as the data the decisions are predicated on. Given the amount of discrepancies that have been uncovered since the budget for the period 21-22 and 22-23, some of which bleed into subsequent years and some that have to be corrected across those subsequent years, I believe now that that's taken place, the figures, the data that we're looking at are more robust. But I can assure members that the governance and financial control that's been sorely missing in previous years, as even highlighted in SITFA in 2020, is now being put back into place. And the capacity and capability of the finance department will be increased following the 3 officers joining us. There's still work to do, there is, and I'm not going to mislead you in that. There is still work to do, including the investment in adequate IT systems to provide that data decision making, but work is continuing at pace to rectify the long-standing issues. Social care national insurance, I think you mentioned the increase in their costs. I think the LA has a duty to provide sufficient provision. That is their duty. But I have been told that there is currently a strong pool of providers with healthy competition in the area. And I'm sure that if some providers decide to exit the market, then others will come forward. But there is a strong pool. There's something on contracts. Having looked at the contracts and how that was factored in, the inflation, I know that those that are imminent, i.e. this year, have been factored into the increase. And a number of contracts have been given an inflation figure higher than RPI, just to ensure that any of these costs that maybe we don't know about, or any statements coming from central government, are covered. So hopefully that can be reviewed before the budget goes forward. Was there any others?
No, I've ticked off all mine on my list. So we've got Neil on the debt burden and the MTFP.
Oh yeah, sorry, you mentioned about the cap and that we had the settlement late today, and they are keeping the cap as it is. So Neil, the latest value of our assets that we've got is obviously the 22-23 because the accounts have been finalised, and I can give you that offline, the amount, but infrastructure, we really ignore that because things like roads and bridges are clearly not income generating and cannot be sold. So we've got about 80 million of investment assets and 420 million of operational assets, i.e. schools, offices, family hubs, those areas that are actually used by the organisation to provide services. So the debt to fixed assets ratio is about 46%. But obviously, the spend, the debt that you're asking about, hasn't been spent on assets that we can now sell. We've got a car park that is costing us money. We've got a leisure centre that went way over budget. These are things, and a lot of capital cost that wasn't. It was maintenance. It was officer time. So that's all built up and built up. And as I said before, it's like somebody putting it on a credit card and not having the ability to pay it back. So there is very little asset that we can sell come out of that 200 million. Debt restructuring, I haven't looked into this very much. Our long-term debt is PWLB and would have an early redemption charge. So that would have to be factored in. We do look at internal borrowing. So we only, so there is borrowing that is more short-term, that we only borrow when we need it, because when we have funding coming in, So that maybe is for something else, but we borrow that for the time that we can keep it on our books. We have advisors, Arlington Close, that advise us if there's a way of restructuring our debt in a better way, in an advantageous fashion. We are continually looking at this, but I'm more than happy to take it offline and see. I know you've got a lot of experience in this area, and I'm more than happy to talk to you at any point about this, and maybe with Julian. Was that all yours?
That's fine. I'll do a bit of research as
Okay.
well.
Thank you very much.
Suzanne, on the
yes, obviously this is something we've just put into the draft budget to be able to help those that are not quite on the automatic payment level. The process, you've heard from Councillor Wilson about our inclusivity officers, and we want to put more of those in. They would obviously help residents to access funding. So that would help you, so it can be a one-to-one with those officers, and we will ensure that the process is well publicised and it is an easy process to happen.
Fantastic. And there was a question from Alison about the consultation. Yeah, absolutely. We're definitely going to be listening to the results of the consultation. It's not so much about the hike in council tax. It's going to be more about what people's priorities are, because, hey, let's face it, I would vote against a council tax increase of 25, but it's just necessary within the constraints that we've inherited. I'll certainly work hard to make sure it's published as soon as possible after all the results have come in. But it's really got to inform our decision-making process both now and going forward into the future. I think that's all those questions. So we'll take another group of questions if we can. I would just remind people that it is about asking questions. It's not about a monologue. So do try and be succinct in your questions. So who have I got next? I've got Councillor Gosling.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me speak. I'm the Ward Councillor for Sunningdale and Cheapside. I've only got a short question here, but I think
Fantastic.
it's relevant. Sorry?
Fantastic.
Okay. Can the leader of the council please confirm the budgeted costs for consultant and any savings, sharing arrangements or other costs to be borne by our council taxpayers from these proposed arrangements?
Thank you very much. Who have we got next? Councillor Hunt. Councillor Hunt. I've got you next in the list. Councillor Hunt. Do you not want to ask a question? No, you don't want to ask. Okay, I'll cross you off.
No.
Oh no! Oh, I'm really sorry, Laurie. You okay? No. Okay, I'm really sorry to hear that. I hope you get well soon, especially just before Christmas. Worst possible time, isn't it? Councillor Connerman.
It's on, isn't it? I think we are.
Yeah.
Councillor Connor and Ascot and Sunninghill. Thank you, Chair. Two questions. First one in terms of recruitment. What I've seen in terms of recruitment is additional programmes on the website, Advantage Card officers, extra finance inclusivity officers, extended training budget, adding to the legal team, 2 more officers in procurement, blah, blah, blah. Are all these positions truly crucial and indispensable at this time? Secondly, on the basis that RBWM is in the state that it's in and the lack of control over the in-year budgets, would it not be better for our residents that the commissioners do come in now, who have specific expertise in dealing with the level of chaos we're currently experiencing? We are not giving any knee-jerk reaction on these proposals or what amalgamations there should be. We will be giving them careful consideration in conjunction with residents and the MP for Windsor, including making sure that there is still local representation, even if the council area is larger. Although I do think there is an argument that reorganisation would be the quickest way of bringing cost-effective and efficient services to residents. I'm keen to hear your views on this. I know it's been touched upon, but if you have anything to add.
Thank you very much.
You.
Thank you for keeping it brief as well. Who do I have now? Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to speak on this subject again. I think we've got some serious problems here, obviously, and I think you have to agree that a lot of it is due to the way this administration has delayed taking action on.
Councillor Sharp, if I can just pause you now. We're not looking for statements, we're looking for questions. So if you can...
I will come to my question in just one moment.
Well, if you come to it now, that would be really appreciated. Thank you ever so much.
Thank you, Chair. So what we need to see is proper action from the council. And so what I really want to understand is, looking at some of the figures that you have created for this budget, I'm just very concerned about the surprise £30 million worth of accounting errors which seem to have materialised over the last several weeks in the accounts. So I want to understand what is the precise nature of these errors, because I don't think I've seen anything in detail covering that. Are any fixed assets involved? I want to understand precisely the time over which these errors occurred, and also when they stopped occurring. And from what you found about these errors, do we know who actually authorised these transactions? Because from my understanding, none of the previous or current councillors have been involved in any of the entries in the books of the council. And if these errors relate in part or in whole to the depreciation of any fixed assets, what fixed assets were we dealing with here, and how has that depreciation been amortized over the time? And have these accounting changes been signed off now by the RBWM auditors? Because in each of the years that we're talking about, there was an audit done, and even if it wasn't signed off by the auditors, they did go through the books and they did go through and look at what was going on. So I really want to understand how these transactions slipped through the system, just to make sure that we understand how this is all happening. Okay, so those are my few questions for the moment. All right.
Thank you very much, Julian. Really appreciated you turning up. So I think, Lynn, you've got some, and Mark, you're going to answer some, and then I'm going to come in.
It's Leo as well.
Oh, and Leo, sorry, Leo. Leo, what would you like to ask? Remember, you're asking questions, not making statements.
Thank you for letting me speak. Just as a question, what happened to the Section 151 officer who left in a bit of a hurry? And was there a reason for her leaving, what people would call talk about being under a cloud or something? And was there anything to do with the 30 million accounting errors at all? Thank you, Chairman.
No, I think the accounting errors happened under your administration, Leo. But it would be really inappropriate for me to talk about HR issues in a public forum. So we've closed off that one. Lynn.
I'll try and cover some of these because they weren't
very.
There was a question around shouldn't we go to section 114? You know, with all these wonderful commissioners that come in and do all their great stuff. Well, actually, you know, there's not many commissioners around. There's so many councils that are in trouble at the moment. And we've actually preempted, because we've already convened an improvement and sustainability board with members of those board, professional officers brought in from other councils who have, and people that have seen this more than once. And they are there to challenge us to do that job that the commissioners do and to ensure that they support us in the plan. And these people have agreed to come to this council because they can see that we have a plan. We are so far ahead of normal councils that are stating a section 114 that they think that their expertise can support us doing exactly what we want to do, which is to improve this council and put it on a financially viable footing. So I'm more than happy that we have their support. Councillor Sharp, I would suggest you read the CIPFA report regarding the errors and the reasons for them. It is all in there. I would say that the fact that balance sheet reconciliations haven't been done since March 2021 has a huge impact on the fact that there's a problem with the accounts. And as you may know, you know, the balance sheet accounts include capital accounts. So things that have been put to capital wouldn't show in the revenue budget or the revenue accounts. You had a few technical questions.
Yeah. I think probably with the technical questions, we'll get back to you after the meeting.
We can give you a written answer for the technical questions you provided because they're not something that we have immediately. But yes, the 30 million does include assets such as cars and computers being depreciated basically over 50 years, which, as you could most probably think, that's not a good idea. But I do believe that a lot of this came out in the audit panel recently. So the audit committee, I believe a lot of this was covered in the audit committee, so it may be in those minutes as well. Okay.
Thank you very much. Mark, there was a question that related to your recruitment.
Yes, thank you, Chair. In terms of the recruitment, basically these roles are required for the council to fulfil its kind of safe and legal remit. So they are either fulfilling statutory requirements or they're addressing the issues that were picked up by CIPFA. So they all have a very robust sort of case behind them.
Thank you very much. On the question of merging, I'm rather confused by it, to be honest, because of course, obviously you're not happy with the 25% council tax increase, but on the other hand, if we start merging with other councils like Slough, our council tax increases will be far bigger as part of that merger, because when you average it out across Berkshire, which is what happened when Somerset went like that, the council tax rise would be near 35%. So I think you seem to be making both arguments. 25% is too low, is too high, but then you want to merge, which will be even bigger council tax rises. So I think you maybe need to work that through a little bit, get a calculator or something. Lynn.
There was a question around consultancy costs, but again, that is a detailed fact, and we can get that out as a written answer.
Okay, I think we also have Andrew Hill, who's asking a question. Andrew.
Thank you. Yes, I understand I've got 3 minutes. Is that right?
Yes, but you don't have to take it. That's not a minimum, that's a maximum.
Thank you. I'm scared of this council tax bill. Thames Water came to the town hall and said it wanted to put up bills by more than 50%. You now say you want 25%. Who's next? I'm relatively well paid and I'm scared. The people in the middle used to be cushioned, but not anymore. We never qualify for any relief. The just about managing people that Theresa May referred to aren't managing anymore. and inflation is rising again. Councillor Werner, you just said that the public cannot object to the 25% rise in the consultation ahead. I would like the legal officer to confirm that in line with gunning principles, the public may in fact say anything they wish whatsoever under that consultation. We, the residents, are not the piggy banks to cover up the financial wrongdoing on an industrial scale, especially when you have not yet held anyone accountable, such as the auditors that Councillor Sharp set out. A few weeks ago, the CFO, Elizabeth Griffiths, announced she was leaving, and I challenged her at scrutiny meetings. I put it to her that the accounts had not been prepared lawfully over many years, and I asked if there was evidence of fraud, to which she said categorically no. RBWM's fraud policy defines fraud to include the willful misrepresentation of transactions or of the council's state of affairs. A few days after that meeting, RBWM updated the losses from reconciliations from around 16 million to 30 million, presumably in part exposed by Ms. Griffiths. These accounting errors are all regulated work covered by professional insurances. RBWM next announced that the computers had been written off over 50 years. So RBWM's position in law is that if it had bought an Apple I computer from Steve Jobs' garage in 1976, then in accounting terms, officers were saying that it's not fraudulent to say that that computer would still be running in the town hall today. That's absurd. Councillor Jones has said that some officers in the past were playing with residents' money and loading the credit card, I think she said. Absolutely, I agree. So the right thing to do is to hold them accountable before you ask for the 25% tax. And the government should help you do that. This is not residents' debt. It's not our debt. It belongs to the unprofessional advisors who failed us. Thurrock Council understands this. It is heroically bankrupt, but began suing 300 other UK councils, saying that they gave unprofessional financial and legal advice leading to their bankruptcy. Surely that's a vital precedent that you should try. Councillor Werner, will you, like Thurrock Council, sue the unprofessional advisors who catastrophically failed to protect us before you demand 25% from residents? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Always good to hear from you. I think on that kind of issue, it would be invalid of me to talk about it. It would be wrong of me to talk about HR issues with staff, or indeed any legal action that we might or might not be considering. So I'm afraid we're going to have to leave the answers there. Lynn.
I'd just like to put on record I didn't say it was officers that were playing with the credit card.
Very good point. And as to some of your other questions, I think probably they should be more easily directed to some of the Conservative councillors that are no longer councillors, as to why they were performing like they were. So, okay, any other comments or questions from the Cabinet members? No? Excellent. Okay, can we agree that paper? Thank you.
Yeah. Chairman?
Thank you very much. Okay, the next item is the Berkshire.
Can I ask one more question, Chairman? Can I say something?
No, we've moved on to the next item, Leo.
I had my hand up to ask.
You had actually asked a question anyway, so.
I know I've asked a question, but it wasn't probably
Leo, can I ask you to be quiet, please?
No, you're cutting me out and
would
a
you be able to
proper
switch on
dialogue.
Please, thank you.
I want to hear.
Okay, so moving on to the Berkshire Local Nature Recovery Strategy. Karen.
Oh, sorry, I thought we were having a comfort break. Give me a moment.
Oh, should we have a comfort break, actually? Yes? Everyone in favour?
I'm just, like
5 minutes.
or something.
2 minutes. 2 minutes.
Give me time to
Oh, you've got to run. Berkshire Local Nature Recovery Strategy.
Thank you very much, Chair. So this paper seeks Cabinet approval to take the draft local nature recovery strategy for Berkshire to public consultation and agree that following public consultation and after the representations received have been carefully considered, the final version of the NRS comes back to Cabinet for approval. England is widely considered to be one of the most nature depleted countries in the world, and local nature recovery strategies are a statutory requirement under the Environment Act 2021. As the lead authority for Berkshire, we have the responsibility to bring it forward and to consult publicly on the draft strategy. The publication of the NRS for Berkshire will identify areas and measures for habitat and species recovery, and will likely have an overwhelmingly positive impact on biodiversity and nature across Berkshire. This piece of work has been a real privilege to be involved with. Although RBWM are the lead authority, the LNRS has been taken forward in partnership together with all the other Berkshire authorities and Natural England as supporting authorities. And I would particularly like to thank Rosie Street, our NRS manager, all of the natural environment team and all of the officers from the supporting authorities and other stakeholders, which have included parish councillors, academics, landowners, farmers, and species and habitat experts from all around Berkshire who have given their time and expertise very generously. The draft LNRS is expected to be ready to go forward for consultation in February. There are just some changes being made at the moment following the consultation with the supporting authorities. There's been very extensive consultation with all interested parties and stakeholders over the last 18 months. And as you will see from the list of engagement events in table 2 in the paper, lots and lots of events and opportunities for all different groups of people to take part in the process. And the supporting authorities have given it their formal approval. But of course, in going out to public consultation, we do welcome comments from people all across Berkshire. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karen. Again, a really good scheme, really good scheme that I'm really excited about. And I've heard comments from councillors across Berkshire saying what a great job we've done on it. So really well done to you and the rest of the team. Any comments or questions from the panel? Or no? Anything from the floor? No? I think we've got Andrew Hill wants to ask a question.
Yes, thank you. Briefly, I'm really glad that you'll be doing work on this. It's very positive. Obviously, you can guess what I would say. I would say that the Great Park site is a fantastic site for animals and biodiversity, and that you should support that as every way you possibly can. And there are documents that the Great Park Group has submitted about the wildlife that is on that site. I'm concerned about the sort of national government statements recently, that essentially to the effect that houses matter more than animals. Is that something that this cabinet agrees with, or what's your view on it? Thank you.
Well, you won't be surprised to hear me say that no, I don't think we do agree with it. I think they're all important at the end of the day. And, you know, the Berkshire Local Nature Recovery Strategy is really going to be quite county changing in its scope as it turns into from a strategy to an action list. So, Karen, would you like to add anything? Or
yeah, no, I definitely hear your concerns, Andrew, and obviously share them. At present, creating the local nature recovery strategies, one for each county in England, is a statutory requirement. And there are a number of measures which are detailed in the paper there is a new duty on all public authorities to have regard to the relevant LNRS for their county, and to integrate the LNRS strategies into the planning system. so that the areas of greatest potential for nature recovery could be better reflected in planning decisions. We're still waiting. Obviously, there has been a change of government since this Act was written. We are waiting for guidance on the implementation of the LRNRS. We haven't received that yet, either about funding for continued work. But yeah, we share your concerns. At present, it is statutory, so there should be some safeguards there. But yeah, share your concerns.
Thank you very much, Karen. Catherine.
Yes, I just wanted to follow up on that. I mean, sorry for the lack of detail in my reply because it literally is off the top of my head. But there are nature-friendly ways to deliver housing. And there was an initiative recently that I saw online, and I'm sorry I can't remember the name of the organisation, but it was backed by Chris Packham, and it was all about it was all about brownfield sites and empty homes, all these things that we've been talking about for many years. And it can be done. It requires imagination, it requires investment, it requires support from central government, but it can be done.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Okay, are we all happy with that strategy? Yep, agreed. South East Care Cooperatives, Amy.
Thank you, Chair. So I mentioned previously about the increasing numbers of children, young people who are being brought into residential care. And I can give you the specific figures that we usually plan for 14 children a year to be, and that has spun out to 30, which is clearly well beyond our expectations. And we've talked as well about, placements being more complex, children's needs being more complex, and a shortfall in foster carers and so on. And this paper lays out some of the ways that we're tackling that issue, and also brings forward the idea of joining with other councils to make a real dent in this issue, because as we've said before, it's not just us that is finding it difficult. When you're looking at the costs of residential care, average placement cost is £5,000 a week, £5,000 a week. Some are over 10,000 a week. So even just a few more really adds significantly to our budget. So we know we're doing things like opening our children's home, looking at supported living accommodation for our care leavers, all of these things. And we want our young people to be living closer in the borough, and as well as that. So we are looking at this thing called the Regional Care Cooperative. It's nothing to do with shopping, as somebody did ask. And it's one way to deal with the sufficiency requirements that we have for placements. It was because there is limited availability across the southeast. It's about joining together with 18 local authorities to try and tackle the issue. And we're actually one of the pilot areas that have been chosen by the DFE to do this. So it's quite an exciting and new area to be in. And it's to try and reduce the reliance on those high cost placements, and just open up access to other placements. And we are being invited to participate. It would mean that we would need to pay a commitment of £125,000 over 3 years, which actually is, when you look at the other local authorities involved, is a fairly modest contribution. It's based on the number of children in care that an authority has, and we have a fairly low number per population number. And it will just help to support things such as the creation of 40 additional regional beds, and hopefully will generate some long-term savings for us. It will hopefully help us to improve our market leverage so we can be a bit more demanding, and try and get costs down. And it will just help to develop the quality placements that we need locally for our young people. So I think this is something that's really quite exciting. It's a new way of working with our neighbours, and hopefully will bring about some really good results for our young people.
Fantastic. Thanks ever so much, Amy. Any questions or comments from the Cabinet? Oh, any questions or comments from the Cabinet? No. Any from other councillors? Helen? Oh, Neil.
around the corner of the post again. So, it's, as always, it's a very detailed piece of work that comes out, trying to forecast the almost impossible to forecast. But things that are known, obviously, the demographics reducing. And that's the thing, isn't it? That affects everything we do. Am I the wrong?
You are.
I've gone off.
Yeah, I think you've jumped the gun. You're going on to the next paper, but don't worry, hold that thought.
I'll hold that thought.
All right, so are the Cabinet happy with that paper?
Probably say that.
Agreed. Okay, we'll move on to demands for school places now, Neil, so prepare yourself. Amy.
Thank you. So every year, not me personally, clearly, but the local authority produces a really detailed report that makes predictions about the number of school places that we'll need across the different areas of the borough. And it sort of looks 5 years ahead, which is a kind of reasonable amount of time to look, because obviously, you know, children are born and 5 years later they'll need school places. So it's a reasonable time frame. And we have a look at things, you know, there are so many factors that are looked at here, things like birth rate, inward migration, outward migration, new housing developments. All of these factors are all put in and fed in to create the predictions. We like to keep a surplus of 5% of school places, because it gives parents choice about where they want to send their children to school, and it helps cope with we get an influx of children suddenly coming in and that sort of thing. Generally across the borough, many of the places have sufficient school places. There's nothing much to note. There are some fluctuations, but generally things are pretty stable. This report just brings out a couple of areas where further action is considered to be needed to mitigate either an increase or a decrease in pupil numbers. So we're looking at particularly in Maidenhead with the primary age, so sort of 5 to 11 age, we can see there's going to be an increased demand in Maidenhead town, particularly the sort of south part of the town. And, you know, we're looking at whether the Chiltern Road site needs to be reopened as a primary school. It was closed a little while ago, and it's currently being used as a special educational needs employment careers hub, sorry, that's the word, careers hub. And it's whether that should be reopened as a school this next September or delayed. And at the moment, because we can move children around, there's still enough capacity, we don't need to rush to open that up again, but it's something to consider in the future, 2027. The other area of note is Windsor, where we have the opposite problem, in that the primary, so first school and middle school numbers, which covers primary up to sort of year and a bit of secondary up to year 8, those numbers are falling. That's due to birth rates falling and also outward migration. Families are leaving Windsor because of housing costs and other reasons. And so there just aren't enough children to fill the first and middle schools there. So we've already asked schools to take some action in reducing their PANs, their pupil admission numbers. So maybe where they have 2 classes of 30, we've asked them to go down to 1 class of 30, but some further action is needed. And the report is setting out that we need more schools to reduce their PANs, and that as a very last resort, we may have to consider looking at whether we don't need all of our first schools. So this paper is asking that we will do some further consultation work, some more work with the schools. And an interesting thing is just this week, we've had the new paper published, the bill, Children's Wellbeing Bill, and that's actually talking about giving councils more powers to work with academies, that we'll have a bit more of a say about what our academies do, and be able to lever them a little bit more, hopefully, to reduce some of those PANs. So there's still some work to be done, and we'll come back in the spring with a further paper with some additional ideas.
Thank you very much, Amy. I also noticed the new bill that will allow councils to start schools as well.
Absolutely.
Which is quite exciting. Okay, so any questions on this from Cabinet? Neil, you're on.
you probably have some deja vu. As I was saying, I know from a Robert Shaw's forum and stuff how hard it is to forecast these numbers. So I do commend the work that goes into it. But I did notice going through there, recently we've been talking about a Ascend site in AL21 in Windsor, having the approval or the sale of a site for Ascend School, which is going to be opened by an academy group. The numbers as the demographics fall in Windsor, even though the forecast EHCP is going up, it's not going up by a massive amount. And I know it's very labour intensive, very cost intensive to run these facilities. Is that likely to come up in future planning? It doesn't appear at the moment. So I was wondering if it's about to appear in the future.
Thank you, Neil. So the provision of special educational needs schools or units is funded and it's considered slightly differently. So the report we're looking at tonight is about mainstream schooling. We've had a look at our alternative provision capital strategy earlier this year when we were talking about opening and expanding various SEND units and things. There is a growing need of EHCPs. There is also the primary need of social, emotional, mental health is growing in our young people, and we don't have a provision like this at all in the borough that is a state school. So we absolutely do need it, and that need is determined outside of this report. In this report, it does note the number of EHCPs. That's a new requirement that we just need to submit to the government within this report, but there are many more areas where we're looking at the need and what schools we need and provision we need for children with special needs. Thank you.
And a second one, always the elephant in the room, when it comes to the viability of the three-tier system in Windsor particularly, there does come a point where the viability of the first school system does call into question, and looking at the falling demographics and the patterns going forward. Has there any modelling been done now about how this might look? We were waiting a few years ago for the impact of the national funding formula, which was likely to make running local authority schools almost impossible, and therefore remove the ability to manage a three-tier system. People are unsure whether that's going to happen now. Is this being looked on as, you might say, it's a necessary evil when the numbers do fall below a certain point and the first schools become unviable on their own? Is this being looked at? So obviously feasibility studies are carried out looking at various things, and this is something that has been explored. But to be quite honest with you, it would be so costly to do. It would cost in millions and millions and millions. And part of the issue is that we have this sort of two-track system of academies and local authority schools now, which makes unpicking who owns land and who is very, very complex. It's really not something that would be considered this time because it's just so costly and not really feasible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great questions, Neil. Thank you. I think we have Andrew here with a question.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Werner.
And can I remind you to keep it on the subject of the demand for school places over the next couple of years, and don't buy into other issues that aren't relevant to the paper.
I will endeavour. I will endeavour. Councillor Bermans, this paper explains at various points the intimate connection between development and school need. And we worked on High Court legal challenges to the BLP. And at the time, we independently asked the inspector to reopen the BLP hearings to hear up-to-date evidence, which those requests were irrationally refused at the time, I would say. One of the grounds we argued was that RBWM was clearly bound to fail to meet the stepped housing trajectory, which claimed, among other things, that the golf course housing delivery would commence around.
Sorry, Andrew, can I stop you there? Although you have 3 minutes, you have to keep it on the subject of the paper. So,
yes, and the subject of the paper, well, I'm going to come to that. I mean, your paper refers over and over again to Southwest Maidenhead, which is the golf course site. So if you don't mind, I will continue with the logic needed to explain that. So RBWM officers had said our reasoning was nonsense, but Councillor Bermange was proved right, and the borough now faces a real practical dilemma by ignoring his evidence. In this paper, despite the fact that 2,000 houses on the golf course are supposed to have been largely finished by 2033 under the stepped housing trajectory, paragraph on page 9, paragraph 2.42, covering the period until 2028, it is stated that, quote, a sharper fall in demand is expected in southwest Maidenhead, where lower numbers of births are leading to a reduced cohort size for future intakes. The report also states that southwest Maidenhead has the most spare surplus capacity. So great is the borough's surplus that you actively consider the need for permanent school closures at paragraph 2.111. It's also stated that there is no need for any new secondary school in Maidenhead and that there is, quote, a significant expected surplus of places in other Maidenhead primary schools. So I would put it to you that there's no evidence in the paper to suggest any need yet for schools in AL13 Golf Club Harvest Hill allocation area, contrary to the BLP pro forma requirement.
1 minute remaining.
The only explanation I can conceive of for this is that RBWM has abandoned any attempt to follow the BLP stepped housing trajectory when planning infrastructure years ahead. So, Councillor Bermange, 3 questions. Do you agree that the numbers set out in the BLP stepped housing trajectory are wrong and that you are now planning infrastructure delivery based on different numbers? Secondly, given the significant fall in the number of children in Southwest Maidenhead and the projected low future numbers, do you agree that your own evidence is showing that there's no proven or planned need for any schools on the AL13 site? And then if so, why are you asking Harvest Hill developers for SIL or Section 106 contributions towards schools in AL13 when you have evidence against the need for them? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Obviously, those questions go beyond the demand for school places and more planning issues. I know that you speak to Adam quite regularly, so I'm sure he'll get in touch and help you work through those questions. Okay, thank you very much. Have we got any other speakers on? Yes, please, Sally.
Councillor Connor and Ascot and Sunny Hill. Just to conflict of interest, I am a school governor. We're all saying that this evening, so I thought I should say. The cluster of schools in Ascot and Sunny Hill are struggling for numbers in their reception intakes, with some of the schools less than half full in their early years classes. According to the birth rates in the reports, etc., it doesn't look as though there will be huge improvements in this going forward. Are there any discussions happening regarding these concerns in Ascot and Sunny Hill? And is the reality a risk of closure? And if so, what kind of notice do schools generally receive in this position if a closure is required?
Thank you for the question. Amy?
Yeah, I think the report is quite clear that at the moment there are no concerns about Ascot. I think one of the interesting quirks maybe of that area is that a lot of children are educated outside of the state system, so that they're in independent schools, which obviously we don't really have any control over. Obviously, the report does talk about the fact that we're taking into account that the VAT increase may affect parents' choices about where they choose to educate their children, and that's a sort of watch and wait, because at the moment there doesn't seem to be a huge amount of evidence that children are leaving the independent sector. So this is obviously reviewed annually, and the officers that do this work keep a close eye on what's happening. So if anything's changed, we usually get quite a lot of notice of these changes. We've been talking about falling numbers in Windsor for a good few years now, so it doesn't happen overnight. So I don't think there's any cause for concern, and we'll keep a close eye on it.
Thank you very much. Okay, if we are all happy, can we approve this paper? Thank you very much. We now have the extension of the Arboricultural Services Framework. This sounds interesting. Adam, you're presenting this.
Yeah, thank you. Obviously, I'm remote, but I'm still happy to present the paper. So, I'll try and be as brief as I can. Essentially, I'll start with the good news here. We are talking about a 2-year extension from a contract which has already run its first 2 years. And the good news is that we therefore are able to actually freeze the prices at the 2022 levels, in spite of obviously being within an environment which is quite inflationary at the moment and over the past couple of years. So this is really good news that we had that option to exercise. Essentially, the contract is the framework agreement is a contract with 3 different arboricultural specialists that provide services for maintenance, for unexpected tree maintenance within the borough. Obviously, the borough has responsibility for quite a number of trees, both highway trees and trees in parks, for example. We have obviously a duty of care to residents to maintain those trees so that they don't become dangerous. So it's important, very important, that we have this in place. And yeah, like I say, I'm happy that we're able to keep the prices as they are. I'm sure it hasn't escaped your attention. This is sort of, I guess I'd frame the quick as the sort of bad news part. Obviously, yeah, it says that I'm coming to you this evening to ask for retrospective permission. I mean, the original 2 years expired at the end of March, and has renewed. Really, that decision, has been determined that it should have come to cabinet at the time, and unfortunately, it didn't. So I'm going to hold my hands up now and apologise to members that we missed this one. I think it's ultimately, though, the procurement rules were followed. Just the authorisation process wasn't as it should have been. I think it's important to own up and to look to make improvements, and that's what we're now doing in terms of the governance over this particular contract. But overall. Overall, I think this is really good news, and I suppose, one good piece of governance coming out of this is at least it's now being funded out of revenue and not capital. So, there's a growth bid in the draft budget to account for additional tree maintenance out of revenue. That is obviously the appropriate place. It's clearly not capital expenditure to be maintaining trees, and we are making good strides into correcting these historic inappropriate accounting treatments. So I can recommend the paper to you. I'm not sure if I'm legally allowed to propose it because I'm remote, but if not, I'm sure you can manage things in the debate in the cabinet.
Richard? Well, I'm really happy to propose it if Adam can't. There's the one matter that I think Adam missed there is that also by having this 2 extension, we're aligning the finish date of this contract with the start date of the new grounds contract, and that gives us options in procurement to jointly procure the replacement trees contract with the replacement grounds contract. And that's not to say that we will be, but it gives us the choice of doing that if that proves best value. And then I have a really good story about trees. On Monday, I reported a tree that had fallen over on a footpath in my ward, and by Tuesday lunchtime, it was gone. So, we are getting pretty good service from the arboriculturists we're using.
Thank you for that story. I could also give you a story about Pinkney's Drive tree that fell down, was removed on the same day. So that's good.
Mine was only a footpath.
Okay, so any comments from the cabinet? Any comments from the councillors? Any comments from Andrew? No, he's not on the list. Can we agree that? Agreed. And we'll move on to the final paper, the Council Tax Base 2025-2026. Lynn.
Thank you. I'll try and keep this very brief. It's getting late. Under government regulations, it's necessary for the council to review its collection fund and decide the council tax base to be used for setting its 25-26 council tax, and the council tax collection rate for 25-26, and the estimated council tax deficit for 24-25. As set out in the summary, the report deals with the statutory requirement to set the council's tax base. The tax base is used by Thames Valley Police, Berkshire Fire and Rescue Authority, local parish councils, as well as the Royal Borough, for setting precepts and council tax next year. An authority's tax base is calculated by adding together the relevant amounts, the number of dwellings, for each valuation band, then multiplying the result by the council's estimate of its collection rate for the year. The council's budget requirement divided by the tax base equals the Band D council tax that's set by the council in February 2025 or possibly March. The tax base has increased by 1,496 Band D equivalent properties since 24-25, which is an increase of 2.15%. And the assumptions included in the calculation of the council tax can be found at paragraph 4.5 onwards.
Thank you very much, Lynn. Is any questions from the cabinet? Any questions from the audience? Genevieve Gosling.
I think this might have been answered actually by Lynn, because I can't hear that one at the back. So I'll ask it again anyway. As per proposed 25% increase in residents' council tax, can the leader of the council confirm your calculations as to the average increase in council tax per household in the Royal Borough of Windsor?
Lynn?
That's not a rate that's used by government to set the council tax, certainly not the statutory council tax base paper. I'm sure that if it's needed, that officers can try and provide something similar for you, but that is not how it's calculated. So it's not an easy option because no one uses it. Yeah. So, but we can try and do that for you. I'll ask officers offline.
If it's possible.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the great question. Okay, we've got Andrew Hill.
Thank you, Councillor Werner. I'm mercifully brief. I did ask earlier about a question about the scope of the consultation on council tax, and I didn't get an answer. So will that be provided later?
If we can keep it to this paper, that'd be really good.
Yeah,
Lynn said she'll take it.
As I said in my report, it's actually going to be published tomorrow, so you haven't got long to wait for it. And so the scope will obviously be in the consultation, but it is very much that we want to know exactly how residents feel that they will be affected, because that is what we are interested in.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you very much, Andrew. So are we going to agree that paper?
Agreed.
Fantastic. Okay, I don't think we need to go into part 2. Does everybody agree with me? Excellent. So I will close the meeting. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.